Before joining the Senate as Attorney General of Missouri, I led the Missouri versus Biden lawsuit, exposing the vast censorship enterprise that the Biden administration had built. In the years that have followed, we've uncovered an even larger and more formidable censorship industrial complex that spans from our nation and across the Western world. The issue we are here to discuss extends far beyond the borders of the United States. It's a crisis that implicates all of Western civilization, a crisis that threatens to plunge much of what we've once called the free world into darkness. Over the past decade, an alliance of activists, academics, journalists, big tech companies, and federal bureaucrats designed a system to suppress and silence their critics. They did so in unprecedented ways, using new, novel tools and technologies of the 21st century. What they built was, in effect, a second state, a faceless system of power not bound by the limits and liberties of our Constitution. Of course, this alliance was all too happy to wield traditional state power as well. Under the Biden administration, the Department of Justice became a vehicle for lawfare against the left's political enemies. The victims of this assault were countless innocent Americans, from concerned parents at school board meetings, to traditional Catholics, to pro-life activists, to President Trump himself. But to fully understand the scale of the left's war on the First Amendment, we must look beyond the formal limits of government. The faceless adversary in American politics today is the sprawling labyrinth of left-wing NGOs, nonprofits, foundations, and activist groups, a shadow state that operates with collective purpose, even as its power is dispersed across a vast constellation of groups. Mass migration, cultural Marxism, political riots, the criminal violence that consumes our inner cities. Pull back the curtain on each one of these, and you'll find the same names, the same groups, time and time again. These groups are home to a permanent left-wing activist class that believes itself to be beyond the reach of our constitutional checks and balances. It's the same class that dominates almost every major power center in our country today. The NGOs and major foundations, mass media, the education system, the arts and culture industry, big tech, and the administrative state itself. Fundamentally, they see our constitutional order as an obstacle to their political ambitions, so they can operate in the shadows outside of its line of sight. Journalists have taken their talking points on disinformation from censorship industry experts. And those experts protect the legacy media's power by discrediting and blacklisting their competitors. Activist groups, along with their friends in the press, enforce this system by launching pressure campaigns against anyone who steps out of line. The revolving door never stops turning. The Biden administration was chock full of alumni of these groups. Some had previously worked in the Obama administration. To take one of the many examples, Gene Kimmelman, a man who was described as Obama's, quote, secret weapon on antitrust at the DOJ, left the Obama administration to open up the DC Office of Global Partners and Associates, a so-called human rights group dedicated to combating misinformation and hate speech online. From there, he went on to take over as president and CEO of Public Knowledge, yet another online censorship group that played a key role in suppressing speech during COVID. Once Biden came into power, Kimmelman was appointed to his transition team at the DOJ, where he subsequently took a job as a senior advisor. It's all in the open now, and you can see how it works. So it should come as no surprise that Jen Psaki boasted about flagging disinformation for Facebook, or that the Biden White House was revealed to have been back-channeling with YouTube about suppressing disfavored speech. Nor should it surprise us that the Biden administration coordinated directly with NGOs and nonprofits to wage a whole-of-society censorship campaign. The administrative state and the NGOs are partners in crime with the big tech companies themselves. Big tech elites may be seeking to rewrite history now, especially that our side, the Republicans, are in power, but for the past decade, they have been eager participants in advancing the left's agenda. Facebook was transformed and it works side by side with NGOs to censor conservatives. Google had used its enormous power to systematically censor, deboost, and throttle conservative ideas and speech, integrating the NGO censorship agenda into every facet of their algorithm. I know this because I've been fighting these people and these organizations my entire career. The Missouri versus Biden case forced the Biden administration to release 20,000 pages of evidence, emails, Slack messages, meeting notes, and other internal communications between the White House, the tech companies, and the NGOs. These documents revealed a vast censorship enterprise, far larger in scope and scale than we could have previously imagined. A coordinated, well-oiled machine with the NGOs at the very center. This machine is waging war on our free speech across multiple fronts. The first is blacklists, groups like NewsGuard and Global Disinformation Index, both of which refused our invitation to testify here today. We did ask. Feed blacklists of disfavored media outlets to major advertising firms, depriving these outlets of access to critical ad dollars. What this does, in effect, is to box out conservative or dissident outlets from access to the public square. The top 10 outlets on GDI's blacklist were all on the political right. Another front involves the manipulation of the public narrative. The nonprofits work with the press to justify mass censorship, manufacture hysteria about right-wing disinformation, and smear and defame their critics. Groups like the Atlantic Council actively train journalists in their talking points about disinformation, which, surprise, surprise, almost always means conservative speech. This provides the public pretext for those same groups to push for more censorship. We've seen that in practice in a series of aggressive pressure campaigns waged against platforms that are too friendly to free speech. In 2020, the, quote, Stop Hate for Profit campaign, led by a coalition of powerful censorship groups allied with journalists and advertisers to push for far more aggressive censorship on Facebook, and Facebook swiftly complied. They tried to run the same play against Elon Musk during his acquisition of Twitter, but Elon Musk was the only leader of a major social media platform who was willing to take a stand and defend free speech. Finally, many of these organizations are directly involved with real-time censorship. Groups like the Stanford Internet Observatory and the University of Washington's Center for an Informed Public monitor social media platforms and flag disfavored narratives for the tech platforms themselves. These platforms proceed to use that information to throttle, censor, or ban disfavored ideas. This is not just an attack on free speech, but an attack on the principle of self-government itself. All of this, all of it, is funded in no small part by taxpayer dollars. Under the Biden administration, seemingly every agency became a conduit for funneling taxpayer dollars to censorship groups. To describe these groups as private makes a mockery of the term. The NGOs are inextricably tied to the federal government. They are another arm of permanent Washington, advancing its ideological goals in places where the government cannot. Where the state's power is limited, either by political pressure or the Constitution itself, these groups step in to man the gap. Let me close with this. We are a nation conceived in liberty, but over the past decade, a great darkness has arisen in America, a darkness that threatens to transform our country forever. We have watched this darkness pour out in crashing waves, throwing open our borders to the world, dispossessing our people, and unleashing a lawlessness that has swallowed our towns and cities whole. But the agents of this darkness cannot win without aggressive censorship and suppression, dismantling the tradition of free speech and thought that has been core to the way that we live our lives even before our founding. In the digital age, with all the peril and possibility that accompanies with it, the struggle for free speech is the struggle for civilization itself. Once again, we must commit that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the face of this new tyranny. Senator Welch.
Thank you.